Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda. This message is pre-recorded today because actually I'm on a flight right now on my way back from Greece with other members of our pastoral team and our church in Drogheda. And we've been there at a summit, and a few members have stayed behind to do evangelism on the streets of Greece. But I remember one of the first times I visited Athens, and Janice and I were traveling up the coast on a coach. I believe actually we were on our way up to Corinth. And as we were traveling up the coast, the driver spoke through the microphone and said, if you look out there is the spot of the sea where the Battle of Salamis took place. And I remember most of the people on the coach, they just shrugged their shoulders as if to say, so what? And went back to whatever they were chatting about and taking selfies and everything else. But I was just captivated. I'm just staring out of the window because the Battle of Salamis is one of the most pivotal events in history. And, a lot of people just haven't heard of it, but actually it's altered everything about the world in which we live today. And in one sense, it's got nothing to do with the gospel. I'm not going to be reading you any Bible verses today, but in another sense, it's got everything to do with the gospel. Because by 480 BC, King Xerxes of Persia had gathered the largest army ever. The Greek historian Herodotus says it was 5 million men. They said that whenever they walked, the ground shook. And this massive army, the greatest army ever assembled, was on its way to conquer Greece. And they crossed the Hellespont. The Hellespont is the body of water, also known as the Dardanelles, which traditionally is seen as the barrier between Asia and Europe. Now, you can march round it, but it's a much longer route, or you can cross that mile of water. And Xerxes had the great idea of putting together some pontoons, floating bridges, that this army of 5 million men would march a mile across the water. And first time he tried it, there was a bit of a storm and the bridges collapsed and he wasn't very happy. And this shows the kind of megalomaniac that he was, because he was powerful. I mean, he was the head of the most powerful empire in the world. He was the most powerful man in the world at that time. And he actually got his soldiers with whips to go down, and they whipped the sea to punish the sea for daring to bring a storm against the will of the emperor. And then the next time, he set up these pontoons and they crossed over and headed on down to conquer Greece. Now, this particular campaign and this war is particularly remembered because of the 300 Spartans who fought them at the Pass of Thermopylae, which was a great bit of heroism and everything else, but actually was not the decisive action in the war. The decisive action took place at sea, and it happened at the Battle of Salamis. And what happened was that the Persians had a vastly superior navy. They were better trained, they had better equipped ships, and they had at least 4 times as many ships as the Greeks. The Greeks had anywhere between 100 and 300 ships. The Persians had over 1,200 ships. And so it looked like it was an unwinnable battle for the Greeks. But somehow, in the tight, confined space, and with all there being so many of these big Persian ships, the Greek ships were able to move much more nimbly around them and attack them, and the Greeks won a famous victory. And it was that victory that basically, without having the navy to supply his soldiers and everything else, that the Persians ended up retreating back to Persia. And they made several other attempts, but they never did manage to conquer Greece, and the Greeks won. Now, you might wonder, why did I say that this has got nothing to do with the gospel and everything to do with the gospel? Because the Greeks were not Christians. The Persians were not Christians. But the world would have looked drastically different if the Persians had won this war. Why? Because the Greeks believed in democracy. They believed in ideas. They believed that by spreading ideas, you can change people's hearts and you can start movements and change societies. The Persians simply said they had an emperor and his word was law. It was a world of cruelty. It was a world of domination. It was not a world that encouraged any kind of thinking or dissent or any kind of cultural movements. And Christianity took place, and Christianity, Jesus was born and Jesus grew up and the gospel was spread in a world that was profoundly influenced by Greek culture, and through the Greeks, Latin culture as well. And you know, if the Persians had won the Battle of Salamis, it's very hard to see how the gospel, now I'm sure God would have found a way, but the gospel could not have spread in the way that it did if the Persians had won the Battle of Salamis. And so many of us as Christians look back on that, and that's why I say it's got everything to do with the gospel, because God was arranging world affairs to make sure that the most important event in the world, which was not Greece, which was not Persia, it was the birth of Jesus Christ and his death on the cross, that message would be able to go out to all mankind. And I want to encourage you today, because sometimes it looks like there's all these things happening on the world stage, and it looks like Christianity isn't involved in it, God's not involved in it. God is in control. And just as God arranged things that the Battle of Salamis would produce the optimum conditions for the gospel to be spread around the world, God is moving, even despite it looks, you might not be able to see him. God is moving in world affairs today. Let's trust in that and let's believe that in Jesus' name. God bless you today. Join us again next time for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda.